Welcome to the Overflow Podcast, the podcast for serious-minded young adults seeking to deepen their faith and make a meaningful impact in their communities, workplaces, and local churches. Join us as we explore how faith meets action.
Well, welcome to the Overflow Podcast. I'm Joe, one of your hosts. Today we have a special guest with us, but before we get to him, we have on my left...
I'm Erin.
And I'm Jeff. And like Joe said, we have Cary Schmidt, the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Newington, Connecticut, and he's joining us. And we're excited to explore the challenges, the benefits, the idea of serving in the local church as young adults. But before that, Cary, you're a pastor, and today our record day is a Monday, and as we know, pastors only work one day a week. So what did you do today?
I usually try to take Monday a little lighter, but I've been back from travel and staff development, and now's a busy time of year. So I had a nonstop day from 7 a.m. till right now. So I'm going to, after I'm done with this, I'm going to go crash and have a chili dog with my 2 grandsons.
Chili dog.
That's awesome. Good. Now, you are quite the In-N-Out burger connoisseur. If I understand correctly. So when's the next cook day where you get to partake in your homemade In-N-Out burger?
You know, I don't know when I'm going to do my version of it. I'm going to be teaching a staff development event in Dallas, Texas in a couple weeks. So I'm definitely looking forward to hitting In-N-Out there.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll probably dive in, kind of get into some of the questions that we hope that our young adult listeners will benefit from. We see the value in having older mentors and pastors around New England speak into our lives as young adults and into the lives of our listeners as we aim to be all that we can be for Christ. And so I'm excited for today. But for those that may not know Cary Schmidt, like I said, he's the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church, I think now 12 years.
Yeah, 12 years as of yesterday.
Wow, that's awesome. That is awesome. Congrats on that. He is an author of books like Done, Stop Trying, Discover Your Destiny. He's has his own podcast, and it's called Growing in the Gospel. And we're excited to have you on the cast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you guys are doing this. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll plunge right in. I'm the firing squad. I get to go first. So we want to just talk about young adults and why really is it important that young adults be involved in church. Usually churches have so many people of the, I don't want to say older generation, but older than us and more experienced. So why is it important for young adults especially to be involved in church? Can you kind of talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the spiritual, like the biblical answer first, and then I'm going to give you the really down-to-earth, practical answer that you're not expecting. So, yeah, I baited you pretty well on that one, didn't I? Okay, so spiritually speaking, guys, you're followers of Jesus who has been planted and placed into his church. You are the next generation leaders. You'll turn around, you'll blink, you'll turn around, you'll be considered the older generation, and you'll be leading your churches. So this is your moment to become rooted and grounded and to develop a strong theology, a robust philosophy of life, a biblical worldview. This is your moment to fully engage the community that Jesus is building around the world. And there's no better time. This is an optimal time in your life. These are some of your best years. You bring some amazing things to the church in the way of your abilities, your gifts, your passions. So, I mean, I mean from the depths of my heart that one of the most significant and rapidly growing and most respected groups in our church are the young adults. They are on fire for God. They love Jesus. And they are bringing a great quality of health and vitality and strength and passion to our church body. So that's the spiritual answer. That's the biblical answer. You guys are really significant to what Jesus did. And hey, in fact, let's look at it. Jesus called young followers. Yeah. All of his disciples were teenagers and young 20-somethings. And he did some amazing work through young people throughout Scripture. But let me tell you the practical, down-to-earth, surprising answer. I read a book a couple years ago called Strength to Strength. The author of the book is Arthur Brooks, and it's not a Christian book, but he profiles the trajectory of life. And he talks about that everybody in life has two curves in their life. The first curve, by curve, he means a rise or an ascent, an arc, and a descent. And that the first ascent is based on what he calls fluid intelligence. And he defines two kinds of intelligence. And I love the way he defines it. He says fluid intelligence is having a library, your mind, your brain, your experience, your knowledge base, a library, and the librarian in that library is incredibly fast and can very quickly coalesce information from your library, from your life experience, your knowledge base, your education, all of that. That's fluid intelligence. But something happens as you age, and this begins to happen for sure by your 40s and absolutely by your 50s. Your intelligence moves from fluid to what he calls crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is to have a larger library. In other words, more knowledge, more life experience, more wisdom, but your librarian slows down. So you have a vast library, but you have a really slow librarian. This is why old people can't remember the names of their children and their neighbors and their friends. This is why at my age, I can speak very intelligently to theology and wisdom and life experience, but I remembering quick facts, and I go, wait, what was that guy's name again? And that kind of stuff. So here's what he explains in the book. The world operates on fluid intelligence, but the world needs crystallized intelligence. And he explained how all the major advances in the world, industrially and technologically, have taken place with fluid intelligence. Young people who are brilliant, who have rapid problem-solving skills, but those people still need the crystallized wisdom of decades and decades of experience. So he talked about the second curve unfolding as you descend in your in your fluid intelligence. In your 40s and 50s, you start to feel like life is outpacing you and young people are outrunning you. He talked about vocations in life that depend on crystallized intelligence, like teachers and pastors. And he said, your young life vocation has an ascent, an arc, and a descent. In other words, we're going to lose our ability to do the things we did in our 20s. But if we build a crystallized intelligence of knowledge and wisdom, then we can have a second curve of an ascent, an arc, and a descent before we go into eternity. All that to say, you guys bring brilliance to an equation in church life for problem solving, for leadership, that the older generation is losing. And I'm in my mid-50s, and I can feel that loss. I can feel the loss that I'm not as good at understanding the natural solutions to things like managing our church database. And so I've got 20-somethings and 30-somethings on our team that are brilliant in these things. So, yeah, you guys are provably, scientifically, okay, not just biblically, you're provably valuable to all that God is doing in the world, especially the church.
Wow. That was super cool.
Yeah.
I did not expect that deep of an answer.
No, that was great.
I told you didn't expect that. Hey, Jeff, just tell your dad, say, Dad, you've got crystallized intelligence, but I have fluid intelligence.
That's right. I bring the energy. So.
You bring the energy, but he brings the wisdom.
That's right.
I don't think your dad needs to be reminded that you bring energy, Jeff.
No.
So.
That's probably true.
That's valid. Very high energy. Probably need to rein it back at times.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of actually answers one of my next questions was like seeing the church and seeing if there were no young adults, how would you see the church suffer? How would you like kind of spin that around to see what specific aspects? You kind of mentioned technology in church, but is there any other specific aspects of church that you would see suffer if young adults weren't as involved or were absent entirely?
I would say there isn't a part of the church that doesn't suffer.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So you name it, and we could talk about how that part of the church suffers without the presence of young life, young energy, young adults. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the church atrophies the program, the music, the teaching, the preaching, the decor, the building. I mean, it all atrophies and it grows cold and it grows old, and it moves from being a place of life and joy and energy and health to being a museum to eventually being a mausoleum. It's going there. So, yeah, God designed the church to be multi-generational.
Yeah.
I will tell you that this goes back to that intelligence thing. Every generation needs every other generation. And so it's really sad when a church doesn't have one of those generations on either end. You take a church that kicks out all the old people because they just want to party, and they've lost a significant level of wisdom and discernment. You take a church that just ages out of the young, and they're going to go extinct. So the church was designed by Jesus to transcend cultures and to be multi-generational, as we're always perpetually handing off the faith to the next generation. So every part of the church suffers without young adults.
Wow. So what would you then say, if the church suffers without young adults, what are ways in which young adults can get involved serving at their church, maybe how it benefits them as well when they do choose to get involved in the church? Are there specific areas that maybe young adults are more effective, gifted, inclined to serve in?
It's hard for me to narrow it down because I'm having a hard time thinking right now of an area of our church that young adults could not serve in. Mm-hmm. I would say they should probably expect for it to be some time before they're invited into some of the philosophical, high-end, long-term decision-making processes, because there is a proving. Bible talks about proving new leaders. Mm-hmm. But along with that, a pure-hearted, well-intentioned, growing young adult can serve in a myriad of ways in the church. And I would say specifically that's going to align with your shape, your experiences, your strengths and weaknesses, your God-given gifts and abilities. What are you passionate about? What has God given you real strong desires for in the cause of Christ? And, like one person might love working with kids and one person might have no patience for kids, but might have technical abilities. I mean, the range of abilities is amazing. I would say this very critically, that God has gifted you to contribute and be engaged and be a part of your church. And you do bring something very, very valuable. And asking God, asking the church leaders, maybe even doing some self-examination with scriptures. What are my gifts? What are my callings? God has shaped you and placed you by his sovereign design. I was teaching in Jakarta, Indonesia last week. It was a wonderful, amazing trip. And the organization that invited me, their whole focus is mentoring young entrepreneurs in Jakarta, really around the world, but in this case, it was Jakarta. So I taught a room of 200 young adults between 25 and 35. They're just out of college. They're starting businesses. They're working in large corporations. And here's the question they're asking and why they came to the meeting. How can I integrate the gospel that I believe into my work life, into my whole life trajectory? And they were making these things through this program. They were making these things called gospel action plans. And I mean, it just blew my mind. It lit my heart aflame to see these Indonesian Christians at marketplace levels in the secular marketplace in a country where it's illegal to proselytize and evangelize, asking how can God use us in our country and in our churches? I would just tell you, don't undersell or underthink your capacity to have a profound influence at your age in your church.
That's a follow-up to that would be, how does serving in the church benefit? Not that we're doing it for our benefit, but what are the benefits of serving the church as young adults?
Yeah, how does it come back on you? And I meant to include that, so thank you for reminding me of this component of this question. When you discover God's will and begin living it out both in your church and in the rest of your life, it is life-giving. Okay. You can chase all kinds of dreams and ideals, but if they're not in the calling and the shaping of God in your life, they will be draining. Even if you get what you're chasing, it doesn't give you life. It doesn't energize you. But the minute you dial in to your calling, because God's shaped you and gifted you for that, it's kind of like what Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn of me, I'm meek and lowly of heart." He's saying, get into the yoke, the work that I've called you to, because that's the work that I'm doing too. And it's interesting. I'll just say this as an example. We just did our staff training with our school and church staff, 75 people. We put them all through a program called Working Genius. Some of you might have heard that podcast or read that book. Patrick Lencioni came up with this framework. It's a analysis of what they call your genius qualities, and that's the areas where you love to serve or work. Your competencies are areas that you're good at, but they don't really give you joy, but they also don't deplete your joy. You're just kind of neutral there. And then your working frustrations. And your working frustrations are areas that you're not shaped. You're not shaped to do that. So if you do it, you're going to work extra hard to do it, and it's going to deplete you. So the point of the study was there are things that when you do them, kind of God made you to do them. And so doing them doesn't feel like work. It's life-giving. But then there are other things that when you do them, they're life-draining. And I would just say when you start to serve in your church and impact the kingdom of Jesus and the lives of his people, it's energizing, and it puts a life in you that it's not even like you're working. It's like you're having fun.
So a follow-up to that is, what would you say to a young adult who's kind of lost that joy and that desire to serve?
That's a good question.
How do you rediscover that joy?
I would say to, first of all, analyze your own personal walk with the Lord, and are you in love with him? Have you thought about the gospel? Have you thought about the cross? Have you thought about how much he loves you? Because the love of Christ constrains us. That love is powerful, and it is motivating, and it should be our motivation. I say all the time, the Christian life is not a have to or an ought to or you should. It's not that kind of life. It's a get to, I want to, I can't believe I get to do this kind of life. But that only works if everything you're doing is saying, I love you too, to Jesus. I love you too. So you got to be motivated by his love. And that comes through a life of worship, personally, privately, walking with Jesus, and just letting his word win your heart, letting the gospel win your heart. If I did something really nice for you guys, if I sent you all, if I paid off your houses, you would feel really overwhelmingly grateful,
Right.
because you'd feel like I'd done something really massive, amazing for you. Okay. So the question is, why don't I feel that way about Jesus? Because nobody's ever done for me what he did.
Yeah.
So the more I understand what he did for me, the more it's going to enlarge my heart of love. And then I would say, Aaron, secondly, if your heart of love for Christ is aflame and is growing, and you're still finding a loss of joy or motivation, I would say it's probably that you're doing the wrong things, or you're trying to win or serve in an area that you're not gifted, or that God's not called you. He's not giving you a natural love for it. Or the third option would be maybe you've been going too hard for too long, and you've overextended yourself, and you've just burnt out. And that's possible too. You could be doing the right things for the right reasons, but too much of it, burn yourself out. You lose all will to survive. So I would say, look at your love for Christ. Is that stoked? Well, I would say then look at your gifting and your placement. Am I doing the right things? And then I would say, look at your expenditure of energy. Am I just overworked and not living the right pace?
Yeah, I guess going off that last point you just made, what would you say to a young adult that feels like I'm involved in all these things, I really love doing them, but I'm just exhausted and I don't feel like I can just step down from them? What would you say in that instance?
That's a really good question, Joe. And I want to say to you that your people group are the most conducive to overwork in the local church, because you have tons of energy. You generally haven't yet started your family or don't have a lot of kids yet, so you have a little more negotiable time. And you've got, because you're out of college, you've got a growing negotiable income, maybe some discretionary income, and you're a little more light on your feet in life. And so the church loves that. It's like, you are available. And it's suddenly, we've got 52 things for you to do. And your heart is sincere. So you love it all and you want to do it all. And the intentions are noble. By the way, the church isn't malicious. The church wants to use your gifts and capitalize on the moment. So that's not malicious. It's all well intentioned. But here's what I would say theologically, the gospel, Jesus doesn't overwork me and he doesn't underwork me. Okay, the gospel doesn't make me overwork because Jesus does the hard work. The gospel doesn't motivate me to lethargy or apathy or disengagement because, goodness, Jesus died for me and his love compels me to serve him and honor him. And there is a cause. I mean, Jesus calls us into a wonderful cause. So the question really is, who has their hands on the throttle or who gets to put their foot on the gas pedal? And you need, as a single or a young adult, to understand you do have limits. You are a finite being. You need some healthy boundaries. You need to sleep enough. You need to work enough. You need to serve enough, but you need to rest enough. You need to restore enough. And you need to be willing to say no to the things you need to say no to so you can stay in a healthy pace. Now, I will tell you, discovering that healthy pace is very, it's a treacherous journey. Okay. We all want to reach our potential. But if you ever think about potential, think of a rubber band being stretched. And if you stretch the rubber band to its potential, you are one fraction of an inch away from snapping the rubber band. Okay. So potential is a treacherous concept. Because what I'm saying is I want to go right to my breaking point. I would say stay well south of your breaking point because that's where you're going to function optimally. And you don't need to overwork because you have a secure identity in Christ. You don't need to work for everybody else's approval. But underwork is equally dangerous. So striking that balance, and I just say you learn by experimenting. And life is very seasonal. Sometimes I overwork and I have to course correct. Sometimes I underwork and have to light the fire again. But as long as you're sensitive to it and following the Lord, he'll help you kind of navigate that week to week.
Yeah. Kind of circling back to a statement you had made earlier, we were talking about gifts and opportunities. So I guess what would you say to a Christian or a young adult that's looking to get involved, but let's say all of the places that they feel like they'd be best used or have their gifts utilized are taken up and they don't really need someone there, but there's a place where maybe they're not as gifted and they feel like, I think you had pointed to it earlier, if you feel not burnt out, but maybe not utilized in your gifts, should they still be serving in an area that is a need for the church?
I think that's fine and noble as long as it's not destructive. Okay, so if you're doing something in the church that needs to be done, but it's going to drive you away from the church in a year or two, then that's not sustainable. Yeah. Okay. Right. Everybody can jump in and put a fire out for a little while. But in the long view, you really want to be running in a lane where you thrive. So, and I say it's a win-win because the church needs your gifts and you need to express your gifts. So when you get in that vein and lane, it really is a great thing for both. It's a win-win. When you are serving in an area where you're not gifted, just because there's a need, it's usually lose-lose. Usually the church isn't getting the best because you're not gifted for that. So you're kind of suffering your way through it and probably you're not doing the greatest job. And then it's a lose for you because you're suffering your way through it and it's eating your lunch. So again, temporarily, no harm done, but in the long term, that's not a winning formula. And I would circle back to the idea that in a healthy church, there might be people doing what you're gifted in, and it might not look like there's a need, but that's usually not the case. Usually there's maybe the ability to rotate in and out.
Yeah.
The team can grow and expand. I don't ever look at our church that way. Like all of our needs are filled in that area. I always say, hey, there's always room for somebody else on the team. We just always expand the teams.
That's good.
So what would you see maybe as a hindrance for young adults? They are not looking to serve. They don't necessarily have the heart to serve. What hindrances are you seeing young adults from fully embracing involvement in the church? Any advice for how to recognize what's keeping you from, getting involved, and how to address those?
Yeah, I think that predominantly, and I really feel for your generation coming up with these challenges and with these pressures, but the allure of our culture and our material world and the achievement-based world. Hey, there's nothing wrong with building a business, being successful, buying nice things. There's nothing wrong with making a ton of money. But the drive, the idolatry of that, when it's not about even those things being right or wrong as much as them being prioritized properly, and maybe the misappropriation of good things into ultimate things. The allure is very strong. Go achieve, go be and do and win for yourself and earn for yourself and buy for yourself and accomplish for yourself. Again, I want to try to cut the split the thread the needle delicately here. Pursuits, accomplishments, hard work, these are good, noble, wonderful things. But when they're pursued as ultimate things, they become idols, and eventually they become oppressors. And so I would say commit yourself to the cause of Jesus Christ. What did Jesus say? Seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you. And then leverage all those opportunities for the kingdom, and make the church, the institution Jesus is building right now on planet Earth, one of your dearest loves and priorities in your life. I mean, next to your relationship with the Lord and your family, your church should be right there. God will honor that, and you'll have to say no to a myriad of temptations and pressures. You'll have to say no to a lot of peer pressures and social pressures. But down the road, 20 or 30 years, the story that you will have written with your life will prove to be the much wiser and much more rewarding path.
Wow. That's some pretty in-depth
Good stuff.
answers, and I think that's going to be super helpful for us as young adults, helpful for me. As we wind down here, Cary, is there maybe one thing just quickly that you look at us as young adults and you say, this is my encouragement for you in your age and your life stage. This is what I see. This is my encouragement. Anything like that?
Yeah. So we live in the age of immediate gratification. Okay. Everything you can have it right now. Google, YouTube, information, AI, to fast food, to microwaves, to educate. Like everything right now. And in many respects, that's pretty cool. All right. I'm pretty high speed guy myself. I like having access to all that stuff. But nothing can speed up the course of wisdom, the course of the long, slow road of growing up in Christ, life experience, and the benefit of planting seeds now that are going to grow a really good harvest in 10 and 20 and 30 years. So there's this old, I don't know if it's Japanese or not, but this old proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. But the second best time to plant a tree is today. And that isn't that right in line with Psalm 1? His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night, and he shall be like a tree. So while we live in the world of immediate gratification, immediate results, the really, really important things, the long range things, are like growing a tree. And so don't be afraid to set down slow roots and to take the long walk with Jesus. Don't be impatient with the rewards and the blessings of following Jesus, because they transpire over decades, not over minutes. You start reading your Bible and looking for instant results, tomorrow, you're probably not going to see them. But you learn the Word of God over 25 years, you're going to have a different life 25 years from now than you would if you didn't know it. So I hate to trivialize it and say patience, because that sounds so condescending. Be patient, I'm just going to try to tell you, I've lived the patient life with God, and it's worth it. The rewards of 20 and 30 and 40 years are really worth it.
Well, Cary, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was super helpful, very beneficial, and thank you for your time. And we'll be praying for you as you continue to minister there in Newington, as Overflow aims to support the local church. If someone's in around Newington, maybe the central Connecticut area, and they have questions about Jesus, or they want to get involved in church, is there a way they can get in contact with you or your church, and how they can get involved or know more about Jesus?
Yeah, they just go to ebcnewington.com, and it's all there on the website.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Cary, again, thank you so much. If you don't know much about Overflow New England, you can find us on Instagram at Overflow New England. You can also find us on our website, overflownewengland.com. And we can't wait to see you in our next episode. Take care.
See ya.